Transitions can be short and abrupt, but, however, or they can be smooth and more gradual. For example, telling a story and then, that leads me to my next point. Of course, transitions aren't just for speaking or writing. Transitions also occur in our lives. Sometimes we find ourselves in between seasons, perhaps, between jobs or between working and retirement. There's transitions when we move or when we become parents or when our kids move away. Sometimes these transitions are neatly defined. They're short, they're exact points in time. Sometimes they're, kind of, fuzzier than that, or maybe even awkward. Adolescence, But transitions are a part of life. This is an interesting Sunday because it is a transition Sunday in the life of the church. In our church year, we are moving from the season after Epiphany, sometimes we call it ordinary time, into next Sunday we will begin the season of Lent. Actually, that begins on Wednesday, but next Sunday will be the first Sunday in Lent. This Sunday is set apart, and in the lectionary it is Transfiguration of our Lord Sunday. We remember this particular time in Jesus' life, this event, but it's also a time of switching gears, getting into a new mindset. We've been talking about doubts and wrestling with doubt and what we believe and things like that, and we are going to shift gears and next week begin talking about training, spring training, if you like, but a discipleship spring training. Lent is a time that we prepare, a thoughtful kind of disciplined time leading up to Holy Week and Easter. This Sunday's transition is, short. It's a defined length, but sometimes transitions aren't so neatly defined, or sometimes they're only really definable in hindsight. And the story that we focus on today kind of has elements of all of those types of transitions. It's a singular event, yet it is sort of a bridge event. It takes Jesus and his disciples from one state to another, one mindset to another. And it also kind of starts, or it doesn't really change the path they're on, but it marks a milestone. So let's look at that in the 9th chapter of the Gospel according to Mark. Beginning in the 2nd verse, 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and brought them to the top of a very high mountain where they were alone. He was transformed, or transfigured in other translations, in front of them, and his clothes were made amazingly bright, brighter than if they had been bleached white. Elijah and Moses appeared and were talking with Jesus. Peter reacted to all of this by saying to Jesus, "Rabbi, it's good that we're here. Let's make 3 shrines, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He said this because he didn't know how to respond, for the 3 of them were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice spoke from the cloud. "This is my son, whom I dearly love. Listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them not to tell anyone what they had seen until after the human one had risen from the dead. Let us hear what the Spirit is speaking to God's people. There's a lot going on in this story. Too much to unpack in just one Sunday morning sermon. But there's also a lot that we may be tempted to try to explain, but honestly, it's just a weird thing. I mean, at some point, there's really no explaining it. It just is what it is. And one of the things, though, that does make sense is that it's on a mountaintop. Mountaintops are often places of extraordinary experiences. It can be literal mountaintops. Moses encountered God on mountaintops. It can be metaphorical mountaintops. We use that phrase, mountaintop experience, to mean some kind of a spiritual high point, a time when we felt we were really, really close to God. A mountaintop, in the literal sense, is a place that it seems heaven and earth meet. So it is fitting that this is a mountaintop experience. What's interesting to me is the response, the reaction to this mountaintop experience. In the moment, Peter doesn't know what to say or do, which I would think is actually probably pretty appropriate if you're in some sort of a supernatural event. You know, we don't have words for that. But he feels compelled to say something anyway. He's one of those people who just can't stand silence, and he has to fill it with something. I'm sure you don't know anybody like that. But he blurts out the first thing that comes to his mind, which is, "Let's make shrines." Or, well, that word's hard to translate into English. It can mean like a tent, a place of dwelling, but also kind of a commemorative event, like to mark a special place. Peter's first instinct is to just, can we freeze time and stay here? There's been moments I've wished I could just freeze time. You know, when I'm having a really special experience, it's been on a spiritual retreat, or maybe it's a special time in your life, your wedding reception, when your children were small, when your children grew up, I don't know. Whatever it is for you, sometimes you feel like, oh, I wish I could just bottle this and just keep it just like this. That's kind of our impulse, is to can we just hang on to this? We want it to just stay like this forever. But that's not really a thing, is it? It never works. Mountaintop experiences are only mountaintop experiences when you're on the top of the mountain. You inevitably have to come down. Spiritual high experiences are moments that pass. Childhood, seasons, special events, all of those are moments that also pass. We can't, despite how hard we try, we can't hold on to them and freeze them like that forever. And Jesus doesn't let them stay frozen on that mountaintop. Peter says, let's do this, let's make these shrines. But just as soon as he says that, the voice says, listen. Listen to him. And it's over. And Jesus doesn't say, okay, well, let's just kind of, everybody take some time to absorb what's just happened and enjoy the view. He says, all right, let's go. Back down the mountain. We got work to do. There's a mission. There's people to heal, powers to challenge, a cross to carry. Come on, let's go. Oh yeah, and just keep this to yourself. Just, till after I'm raised from the dead. Wait, what? After you're raised from the dead? See, that's something that he's said before. In fact, one thing that's important to do is to look at this transition experience. Well, to know it's a transition, you have to know what comes before and what comes after, right? Well, what comes immediately before is Jesus predicting his death. He says he is going to have to go through tough times. He must suffer and be rejected. And again, just after this moment, this transfiguration, they come down off the mountain, they have to heal or throw out some demons, and then he again reminds them that he is going to be killed, but he will be raised on the third day. They continue to misunderstand or just not understand what he's talking about here. But the significance is that this mountaintop glorious experience is colored by that news that suffering and death are coming, are inevitable. So in that sense, this is not your average mountaintop experience. It's not just a spiritual high. It's one that's couched in the knowledge that this is only temporary. This is a glimpse of glory, but we know there's hard, hard days to come. I think I think this is a pretty good lens for interpreting our world, interpreting life. It's kind of like a microcosm because we are often in a transition where we don't know exactly what is going to come out the other side. We don't know how things turn out exactly. And it's tempting to try to hold on to what we have. Let's just keep it like this. Let's just stay here. But, it just doesn't work. We can't. It never works. So what do we do? What do we do in these transition times in our lives? And in fact, I think that we are in a transition period of, a large scale, a transition in our world. Certainly, we have an election year. That's going to be some kind of milestone. We don't know how it's going to turn out. There are concerns and fears and lots of unknown. And then we're in a time, I think, that our world is changing. We're in a transition. I was in a clergy workshop with a guy from the Institute of the Future, which I did not tell him this, but I just think I hope he didn't name it that, because I think that's kind of a little bit, I don't know, arrogant. But he said we're in a Kairos decade. He sees a major transition happening in our world. And so, let's look at this event again, the Transfiguration. How does it teach us what to do in these times of transition? Well, clearly it teaches us we can't just hang on to the best part and refuse to see anything else or come down from the mountain. That's not an option. Even if we could try to do that, we're explicitly told that's not how Jesus followers work. We got to go down the mountain and get back to business. One of the commentators I read pointed out that this transfiguration is one of 3 pillars, key events in the gospel according to Mark, along with Jesus' baptism and his crucifixion, and that there's parallels between these. And the important part is that it frames it as an apocalyptic event. This is an event that has eternal importance, in other words. It is an event that makes a difference in the world, and that makes us different in the world. And what do we do? This vision, this transfiguration sent them back into action, back to work. And here's the way I think of it. It's teaching us the practice of pointing toward and participating in the ultimate good that is to come. Now, we don't know exactly what that looks like or how it's going to happen, but the goal is at least we can say the goal is for us to be more like Christ, right? Well, how else are we going to get to the goal of being like Christ without acting like Christ? Right? It's sort of a different way of thinking of goals. Less as a finish line and more as a state of being. And if your goal is a state of being, the only way to achieve that state of being is to act our way into it. Be the change you want to see in the world. You may have heard that. It's attributed to Gandhi, but not provable. But the idea is we act our way into that kind of being. We practice it. The only way to become Christ-like is to be like Christ. It kind of sounds silly, honestly. When I say it like this, it sounds very simplistic. But I think it's one of those, it's simple, but it's not easy kind of things, you know? But I think that's what we learn here. That when we are in times of transition, and we don't know exactly where we're going or what it's going to look like, our best guidance is to act our way into being who we want to be. Point toward Jesus. Act like Jesus. And I think we will get to the goal of being more like Jesus. In fact, I think that's the only way to get there, is to just practice it, to just work our way into that way of being. I hope that you have found some value, recognized maybe a time that you've been in a transition, resonated with this, and even if maybe you aren't personally in a particularly tumultuous transition at the moment, good for you if you are. Awesome. What's that like? I'm not even sure I know. I'm always between something, on my way to something else. But I hope that you are able to reflect on that wherever you are, or perhaps it's a place you have been, that the only way to get to where we're going is to keep our eyes on Jesus and to act our way into being like Jesus. And I hope that is helpful for you this morning. If you are pondering and feeling a nudge to take a step in your spiritual life, whether that is to accept Christ formally, officially, maybe for the first time, or perhaps you would like to reaffirm your faith, perhaps you would like to become an official member of this community of faith. If you'd like to make any of those decisions, or if you'd like to visit with me and have some help deciding what that next step in your journey might look like, I would love to visit with you. My contact information is on the bottom of that prayer request page in your bulletin, and you can call or text or email me, set up a time that we can visit about where you are in your faith. Or if you would like to make a decision this morning and share that with me, then I would love to celebrate that with you, and you can do that as we stand and sing. So as you are comfortable, please join us in standing, and we will lift our voices once more. Thank you for choosing to begin your week in worship with us. We pray that you will have a wonderful week, stay warm and as dry as you can. And I pray that you will go knowing that you never go alone.